podcasts. A foot that can't lift itself, and a pedal that stops a locomotive the moment you stop pressing it. Two things that have absolutely no business being in the same sentence, and yet they describe the exact same terror. Today, we're unpacking the symbolism of twinning the dead man's pedal with drop foot from sciatic nerve damage, and the strange gravitational pull to stay close to the railroad tracks. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what these three images share medically and culturally, why the foot has always been one of literature's most loaded symbols, and what it actually means when the body's own signal system goes silent. My co-host has been sitting with this one for a while, and I think it's going to get under your skin, so let's get into it.
Let's start with the dead man's pedal, because I think most people have a vague sense of what it is, but don't really know how it works, and the mechanics matter here.
Right, yeah, I know it's a train thing, but walk me through it.
So, according to Wikipedia, a dead man's switch is a switch designed to activate or deactivate if the human operator becomes incapacitated through death, loss of consciousness, or being bodily removed from control. On a locomotive, the engineer has to keep the pedal pressed down while the train is in motion. The moment that pressure is released, the moment the engineer is no longer actively, consciously holding it down, the train stops.
So the train's entire forward motion depends on a living body actively pressing down. The second that body is gone, everything halts.
Exactly. And there's a piece in Brains magazine by a writer named Donna Obarg, whose father was a CN rail engineer for 25 years. She writes about how he taught her that the dead man's pedal was an anchor to the present. It ensured the engineer was engaged, healthy, and prepared. She actually reframes it as a symbol not of death, but of the gift of life, of presence.
That's a genuinely beautiful reframe. It's not about what happens when you die, it's about what it means to be alive and pressing down.
And that reframe is exactly what makes it such a powerful twin for drop foot. Because drop foot is, medically speaking, the body's version of that pedal being released.
Okay, so let's get into the medical side. What actually is drop foot?
According to Wikipedia's entry on foot drop, it's a gait abnormality where the forefoot drops due to weakness, irritation, or damage to the deep fibular nerve, which includes the sciatic nerve, or paralysis of the muscles in the anterior portion of the lower leg. And here's the key phrase: it is usually a symptom of a greater problem, not a disease in itself.
A symptom of a greater problem. That phrase is doing a lot of work.
It really is. And the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke puts it plainly: people develop foot drop when they are unable to raise the front part of their foot because the muscles that lift the foot become weak or stop working. And people with foot drop are more likely to fall because they cannot lift their foot fully when walking.
So the foot just drags. It can't clear the ground.
Right. According to Wikipedia, people with the condition drag their toes along the ground or bend their knees to lift the foot higher than usual to avoid the dragging. There's this characteristic high-stepping gait, the body compensating for a signal that isn't getting through.
And the nerve pathway involved, that's the sciatic nerve?
The peroneal nerve branches off the sciatic nerve, which is the largest branch of the lumbosacral plexus. According to a 2024 paper in Orthopedic Reviews by McCormick and colleagues, the common peroneal nerve is actually the most commonly injured nerve in the lower extremity and the third most common mononeuropathy in the entire body. When it's damaged, you lose the ability to dorsiflex, to lift the foot from the ankle. The signal from the brain simply doesn't arrive.
The signal doesn't arrive. That's the dead man's pedal. The engineer stops pressing, the signal stops, the train stops.
That's the twinning. The dead man's pedal requires active, conscious downward pressure to keep the train moving. The sciatic nerve pathway requires an intact, uninterrupted signal to keep the foot lifting. Both are systems that only function when a living, conscious body is fully engaged. The moment that engagement is severed, whether by incapacitation in the cab or nerve damage in the leg, the system collapses.
Okay, I want to sit with that for a second because it's actually kind of stunning. And it makes me wonder, how common is this? Like, are we talking about a rare condition or something a lot of people are living with?
More common than most people realize. According to WikiSM, the sports medicine wiki, of 303 patients presenting with foot drop, 31% were found to be due to peroneal neuropathy. And one study found peroneal nerve injuries were the most common lower extremity neuropathy in athletes. This is not a rare edge case.
And yet we don't really talk about it symbolically. We don't give it the cultural weight it might deserve.
That's actually a really important point, and there's a framework for understanding why. A writer named Krista on the blog My Upright Life references Thomas C. Foster's book, How to Read Literature Like a Professor, which argues that diseases earn their place in literature by being picturesque, mysterious in origin, and rich in symbolic possibility. Tuberculosis made the cut. Sciatica almost never does, despite the WHO putting the lifetime prevalence of low back pain at 60 to 70%.
Wait, 60 to 70% lifetime prevalence and it barely shows up in literature?
Almost never. And yet, drop foot from sciatic damage actually does meet Foster's criteria in a strange way. It can be mysterious in origin, the damage can come from trauma, disease, toxins, even surgery. It's visually distinctive with that high-stepping step-page gait. And it is, as we're exploring right now, metaphorically rich.
So let's go deeper on the foot as symbol, because the foot has a long history in literature and mythology, right?
A very long history. According to a survey on Number Analytics titled The Foot in Literature, the foot is a ubiquitous symbol conveying vulnerability, weakness, journey, and spiritual or emotional states. The most famous example is Achilles in Homer's Iliad, rendered invincible except for his heel, which remains unprotected and ultimately causes his downfall.
The one spot where the signal didn't get through, so to speak.
Exactly. And then there's Frodo in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The survey notes that his feet become increasingly battered and bruised as he travels through treacherous terrain, reflecting the physical and emotional toll of his quest. The state of his feet is a visual record of the journey's cost.
So the foot isn't just a body part in these stories, it's a kind of testimony.
That's a good way to put it. And in Shakespeare's Macbeth, the survey points out that Macbeth's guilt and paranoia are reflected in his disturbed sleepwalking, washing his hands and feet. The foot becomes a symbol of his troubled conscience, his inability to cleanse himself. So across mythology, fantasy, and tragedy, the foot carries the weight of the journey, the vulnerability, and the inner state.
And when the foot drops, when it literally cannot lift itself, all of that symbolic weight drops with it.
That's the heart of the twinning. The dead man's pedal stops the train. Drop foot stops the journey. And both leave you standing next to the tracks.
Which brings us to the third piece of this, the pull to stay close to the railroad tracks. Why does that image keep appearing alongside these two?
Because the tracks represent something that keeps moving regardless of whether you can. According to Brainwise Mind, trains symbolize life's journey, change, and transition. They connect past and future, bridging different stages of life. The tracks are the path. They don't wait.
And if your foot won't lift, if your signal is cut, you can't board, but you stay close.
Staying close to the tracks is staying close to the possibility of movement, even when your own movement is compromised. It's a kind of hope that is also a kind of grief. The tracks are still going somewhere, you're just not sure you can follow.
Brainwise Mind also notes that trains evoke a psychological duality, both freedom and confinement simultaneously. The journey offers adventure, but can also feel restrictive.
And that duality maps almost perfectly onto the experience of drop foot. The tracks are right there, the journey is right there, but the body's own signal system has been severed. You're free to go, and you can't go. That's the confinement inside the freedom.
I want to bring in something from the disability culture angle here, because I think it reframes the whole thing. Britannica's entry on disability culture makes the point that the meaning and significance of an impairment derive from the treatment of the individual in the broader cultural context, not just the severity of the impairment itself.
That's crucial. Because what we're really talking about when we twin these images is a cultural question as much as a medical one. The dead man's pedal is a piece of engineering that became a symbol. Drop foot is a medical condition that carries enormous symbolic potential. And the railroad track is a cultural icon of journey and transformation. When you put them together, you're asking, what does it mean to be the one who can no longer press down?
And Britannica also notes that disability culture emphasizes a way of living and positive identification with being disabled, not just the loss, but the identity that forms around it.
Which is where the symbolism gets really interesting. Because the dead man's pedal, as Donna Oberg writes in Brains magazine, was her father's way of teaching her that presence, conscious, embodied, active presence, is what keeps the whole system from stopping. And that lesson doesn't disappear when the nerve is damaged. It transforms.
How so?
Because the person with drop foot is still present. The signal is interrupted, but the person isn't gone. The pedal has been released, but the engineer is still in the cab. The question the symbolism asks is whether we build systems, medical, social, cultural, that can recognize that presence even when the foot isn't lifting.
That's a genuinely different way of reading it. Most people would see drop foot as a loss of function. You're reading it as a test of whether the system around the person can adapt.
Right, and the railroad track is the system that doesn't adapt. It goes where it goes. The dead man's pedal stops the train if the engineer is gone, but it doesn't help the engineer who is still there, still conscious, just unable to press down. That's the gap the symbolism is pointing at.
And the pull to stay close to the tracks, that's the person who is still there, still conscious, still wanting to be part of the journey.
Exactly. It's not a death wish, it's the opposite. It's the refusal to walk away from the possibility of movement, even when movement is hard.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, that drop foot is usually a symptom of a greater problem. What does that mean in the context of the symbolism?
It means the foot dropping is a signal. Just like the dead man's pedal releasing is a signal. Neither is the problem itself, both are indicators that something deeper has gone wrong. The foot drop tells you the nerve pathway is compromised. The pedal releasing tells you the engineer is incapacitated. In both cases, the visible symptom is pointing at an invisible cause.
And the railroad track just keeps going, indifferent to all of it.
That's the tension. The track is indifferent. The train is indifferent. The system was built for a body that presses down reliably. When that body changes, the system doesn't change with it.
Which is actually what the UK Department for Transport's 2025 research on disabled people's experiences of rail is grappling with in a very practical way. The gap between what the rail system was built for and what disabled passengers actually need.
And that research, commissioned by Varian and published in March 2025, uses the social model of disability, the understanding that people are disabled by barriers in society, not by their impairment or difference, which is exactly the symbolic argument we're making. The foot dropping is not the problem. The system that can't accommodate a foot that drops, that's the problem.
So the symbolism of twinning these three images, the dead man's pedal, drop foot, and the railroad tracks, is actually a critique as much as a metaphor.
It's both. It's a metaphor for what it feels like to be the person whose signal has been cut. And it's a critique of systems that only function when the body pressing down is whole and uninterrupted.
And there's something almost darkly funny about the fact that the dead man's pedal was originally designed as a safety feature, to protect people. But it only protects the system, not the person.
That's a really sharp observation. The pedal stops the train to prevent a runaway. It protects the cargo, the tracks, the people downstream, but it doesn't help the engineer who is still alive and struggling. The safety feature is designed for the worst case, not for the complicated middle ground where someone is present but impaired.
And drop foot lives in that complicated middle ground. It's not paralysis. It's not the absence of the person. It's a disruption in the signal.
According to Wikipedia, foot drop may be temporary or permanent, depending on the extent of muscle weakness or paralysis. So for some people, the signal comes back, the foot lifts again, the pedal is pressed again, and for others, the compensation, the high-stepping gait, the ankle-foot orthosis, becomes the new normal. The journey continues, just differently.
The journey continues, just differently. That might be the most important line in this whole conversation.
And it's why the pull to stay close to the railroad tracks makes sense, because the tracks are still going somewhere, and the person with drop foot, the person whose signal was cut, is still a person who wants to go somewhere.
So when you step back from all of this, the engineering, the neurology, the literary history, the cultural symbolism, what does it really come down to?
It comes down to presence. The dead man's pedal is a system built on the assumption that presence is binary. You're either pressing down or you're not. Drop foot is a condition that reveals how wrong that assumption is. Presence is not binary. The nerve can be damaged and the person is still there. The foot can drag and the journey is still happening. The tracks keep going and the person keeps wanting to follow.
And the symbolism of twinning them is really asking us to build better systems. Systems that can recognize presence even when the signal is interrupted.
That's it. The dead man's pedal was a brilliant piece of engineering for its time, but the world has changed. The people on the train have changed. And the question the symbolism leaves us with is whether we're willing to redesign the pedal.
Here's what this really comes down to for anyone listening. You now have three images that, on the surface, have nothing to do with each other. A locomotive safety switch, a nerve condition, and a set of railroad tracks. But together, they describe something deeply human. The experience of being present, wanting to move forward, and finding that the system around you was only built for a body that never falters.
And the actionable insight here is actually the social model of disability that the UK Department for Transport's 2025 research invokes. The idea that people are disabled by barriers in society, not by their impairment. When you see drop foot through that lens, the question stops being, why can't this person lift their foot? And starts being, why did we build a world that requires a foot to lift in exactly this way?
And when you see the dead man's pedal through that lens, the question stops being, how do we stop the train if the engineer fails? And starts being, how do we support the engineer who is still there, still trying, just struggling to press down?
The tracks are going somewhere. The question is whether we build a system that can take everyone who wants to go.
We started this episode with a foot that can't lift itself and a pedal that stops a train the moment you stop pressing it. Two things that seem to have no business being in the same sentence. And now, they're inseparable. The tracks keep going. The question is whether you're still pressing down, and whether the system around you is willing to count you as present even when you're not.
That's the provocation the symbolism leaves behind. It doesn't resolve, it just keeps moving, like the train.
Thanks for riding this one with us on Copilot Podcasts. The tracks are still going. We'll see you at the next stop.